Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Campbell Talk. And tonight we are with you live from our headquarters here in West Palm Beach. And we have with us the one and only Suzanne Mintz, who will be joining us next. Um, Maybe you've seen her a few weeks ago. She talked about being in a bisexual relationship, or her partner was bisexual, and they were high school sweethearts and they got married, and um, a lot of um, good information in there because we were talking about caregivers, and we were talking about how do you support someone living with HIV and AIDS, and also how do you take time for yourself to breathe, and how do you cope with all of that, dealing with stigma and the stress and everything that comes with being a caregiver. So we have her back with us tonight. And we're just going to dive a little bit more because, we've not really heard from the caregiver's perspective. So we're going to dive in, and we'll be right back with Suzanne. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We made it.
um, Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We have Susan Mintz. She's a speaker and author of Committed to Love. She also have some other books, and she has a couple more um, books in here on the way. And I look forward to our future ventures together. I think it's going to be sweet.
That's for sure. They are in the works as we speak.
Absolutely. And if you have questions or comments throughout this, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. We'll do our best to get them answered live on air. And if you are someone who wants to get tested, we will have information up on the screen where numbers you can call and where you can go, as well as if you are a person looking for a place to get connected to healthcare services, we'll be able to help you get connected as well. So thank you for watching, and I'm gonna just put you in the hot seat right now for you to give us a brief synopsis about who you are, how did you become the person you are today, and
hot spot, hot seat.
Well,
I'm an author. First of all, I know that I was born to write, and I was born to speak. And if I believed in something, I could sell it. If I believed in someone, I could be with them. My biggest thing is that once I get involved with something that I know I'm supposed to do, I won't stop. And that's what happened when Jeff and I were friends. Jeffrey Mintz, who ended up being, he wasn't really my high school sweetheart. He was my best friend. But as fate would be, that I ended up getting pregnant and we got married. And then I found out on my honeymoon that he was bisexual, or so he thought. And we dealt with it, but it was rough on and off. I would say, go to watch the movie with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I mean, I'm like that with the Notebook combination. But in general, I loved him, and I knew I was supposed to stay with him and love him. And ultimately, in when we heard about AIDS in 1981, 1981, it just became something that I had to deal with as far as my health. So an abstinent relationship from a sexual relationship kept me alive and healthy, but never stopped us from loving each other and being intimate. And then he became ill in 92 and passed in 94 in our home with hospice help, who does not get enough credit for hospice. And that's my journey. And I knew then with my book, Writing Committed to Love and Journaling, which is I encourage people to write, please write your story. and journal it, because you don't know, one day you might put it into a book, or you might affect someone's life, or even if it's just to help you. So that's my story in a nutshell. It's been committed to love the book. And it seems like, decades ago, which it was, but it's more relevant today, I think, than ever, especially when it comes to relationships and the difficulty today that people can have, more so than I even experienced at the times we were in. But you're stronger than you think you are, and you can overcome any obstacle if you really believe in it and you know that God wants you to do it. So you have to have faith and hope, and don't stop going forward. You're just in the middle of your journey, so don't get out before the time. How's that?
Absolutely. I think that's super amazing. So we'll just jump in and you can tell us, when did you first heard about HIV and AIDS?
1981 on the news. It was on well, I think it was the ABC News, because I had the TV on. Jeff wasn't home from his private practice in Houston, and I think it was Peter Jennings at the time, and he came on and said that there were men in Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, that were coming down with a pneumonia, and they were very ill and they were dying, and of course fear hit everybody because nobody really understood it. And then the figures mounted and the things mounted, and they weren't sure how you could get it. But I knew, having caught in every other STD from Jeffrey, may he rest in peace, I still love you, Jeffrey, but he gave me so many other STDs that wouldn't kill me. I knew that HIV, when I was hearing about the pneumonia related and how sick these people were getting, I knew that I had to definitely take a precaution then. So in 1981, so I'm 40 years into this as a activist and provider of information, and going forward in the ministry that I know and the purpose that God gave me, and that's to speak anywhere about HIV and my life and how it affects other people's lives and where we are today with it, with amazing medications that certainly can help keep you alive a lot longer and healthier.
And then since finding out your status, I mean, since finding out Jeffrey's status, what was that like for you?
Well, there wasn't enough vodka to consume that night, or enough marijuana. I mean, if I could go in under a rock, I would have. And I know I smoked my brains out after we talked. I smoked and was drunk. I was stoned. So was he. But it was horrible. And the fear set in. And one thing about my darling husband is, if you'd known him, and there'd be people one day, the tens of thousands of people you're going to get on your show are going to be listening, and one of them's going to remember Jeffrey, because he still had a lot of people who loved him, and he would only have been in his 70s, so there's still people around. But he would never, ever have lived wanting to know he was positive. And I say this honestly because it was in 1986 when I said to him, we'd moved to Boca, and I said to him, Jeffrey, if something should happen, because our friends, everybody in Houston and Montrose was dying. My dental patients were dying. Our neighborhood was dying. We lived in a very artistic, incredible neighborhood, but it was very gay, and the clubs were very gay, and it was a wonderful area, but it was very gay. And next thing I know, my dental patients were not coming in, and they were telling me they're just ill, or they had cancer. And I put it all together that that's the reason why. We were in the early 80s. And so we moved to Boca, and I said to Jeffrey, I said, Jeffrey, I'm never going to remarry. That's not for me. And I'm never going to want to just be with anybody for the money. I said, that's not me. He knew me so well. I said, you could better get a life insurance policy, because if something happens to you, I'm screwed. And they got a life insurance policy out in 1986. And so about 3 years later, he came through negative. So, we were just so happy. And then it was in 3 years later, um, I said to him, Jeffrey, that we really, up it a little bit in case something really happens. The times are changing. But he wouldn't go for another test, because he knew then the testing had gotten more perfected. The medications hadn't, but the testing had. So he would never have gotten another test. And he would never also wanted to know he was positive, because this man was an absolute wanted to live each day to the fullest, which is why my life was so incredible with him, because it was a roller coaster that I never wanted to get off. It was just a wonderful travel and food, and he was first class, but he could never have lived the lifestyle knowing he was positive, nor take medications constantly. I could barely get the other few down, and that he had to take. I was throwing him into Snickers bars and butter and I was cooking ways I never had to cook before, but I had to get these pills down him. So it was horrible, needless to say. But I know that our love and my love for him and our love for each other, he died the way he lived, with dignity and pride, and in his home with me taking care of him and hospice help. So I would not trade one thing other than I wish he was with me now.
Okay. You mentioned in the last time you were on the show, you mentioned that you are a person of faith. So, um, would you say that you relied on your faith back then, or was that something that you sort of like came into as time went by?
I always believed in God, as raised as a Jewish person in my faith. I always believed in God. But the older I've gotten and the more responsibilities and the more I've had to deal with in life, the stronger my faith has become, because I've needed to hold on to that hope and faith and trust that God's not done with me yet. So it's gotten more and more and more. And in the times we've been coming into, it's even stronger because I know a word of hope is what people want. They want real and they want hope and they want to believe in people that are real. So I've gotten much more into my faith, and even through AIDS and Jeffrey's passing, my faith kicked in extra, extra strong.
How was the feedback from? I know, like you mentioned, you had close knit friends, and those close knit friends were um, supportive. But how was it for like his family or your family, or kind of like some of your colleagues once his HIV/AIDS diagnosis was made? How was that for you? Did you experience stigma, discrimination? Did people support you in that process?
We had an amazing support system. No, some people I think knew that Jeff was gay, he was bisexual. I think some people knew and suspected it, but it wasn't until he was put in the hospital that the hardest thing all this is in the book, in my book, Committed to Love. Every chapter of 24, there's an issue. The hardest thing I had to do was call his parents and tell them that your son is gravely ill and you need to come here to the hospital. And they lived in Hollywood, Florida, and they were already getting up there in their 70s. And I told them, if you want to see your son, you get up here. So they knew something was serious. But they adored him. As soon as they got to the hospital, I was a mess. My sister had to call my parents. My sister in Massachusetts had to call my parents in Albany, New York, and tell them I couldn't handle it. And the hospital people I knew from doing walks and just getting involved with the basic structure and with the health with CAP at that point, I had kind of an infrastructure set up in case something happened. I knew a couple of doctors that were great. We had a couple of great friends that I knew, but our support system was amazing. And I will say that I could never have gotten through without some neighbors helping me. Of course, husband at the end, but his parents, um, just the love of his colleagues. I never experienced any stigma with him. I experienced stigma when I went out into the real world after he died.
Hmm.
And then when people would say, "Oh, you're a widow, and what did your husband die from?" Because I was very involved with different organizations in Boca, all many cancer and diabetes. And if there was a black tie event to go to, I was going for sure. My journals were going to get published. I was going to be this major star overnight. So I was going everywhere in Boca to go out. And I realized then, though, that my story was bigger than that. But the stigma when I would say it, at an event, and some man would come over and approach me because I was only 48 and 50, 51 too. And it's hot seat, hot spot, hot me at that point. And so they I mean, we're ruling. They would come over and so where the wedding began. And said, "Yes, I'm a widow. How'd your husband pass?" Well, he had AIDS. Jesus, they would run like they had diarrhea. They were running to the exits. So I experienced stigma a lot uh, in general. And then, of course, people had said, "Susan, you don't have to pour your whole heart out to everybody when you first meet them." With me, to me, it was just part of my life. but people didn't know much about it even then in the early 90s and even during the 90s. And things didn't change up until now, and there's still the stigma. It's not going away until people start speaking out. The only way we'll ever remove a stigma of anything is for the people who are visible to come out and not be afraid and be judged and say, "Who are you to judge me? What are you, that perfect? Judge not, lest you be judged." I mean, who are you to judge my life? So you must remove the stigma. But I had an amazing support system and infrastructure. So I was blessed. And to this day, I have some great friends. They're not Jeffrey's. I mean, well, I don't know where his friends are, where they've gone. But you have to have also a plan B. And if you don't have positive people around you, and if you don't have yourself in order, you're going to be a victim. And being a victim is not good. You do not need to be a victim today. And stigma will make you feel like you're a victim. And that could be for many issues. We're dealing with HIV, but stigma on anything will cause you to feel like a victim. And you don't. You're a warrior. You're not a victim. You're a fighter, a survivor. You're not a victim. That word should not even be allowed except if it's through something really horribly disastrous.
Okay. Did you ever had children with Jeffrey or plan to have children with Jeffrey?
Nope. Never wanted any. I have several godchildren that I raised over the years, but Jeff and I never wanted any. So for my 30th birthday, I mean, I got pregnant by him. I mean, and I'm real honest. I mean, I slept with everybody at that time. It was the 60s. We slept around, we drank, we did everything and never thought about it. And so having multiple partners at the frat houses and I didn't care. But the one person one night in the winter who stayed over at my parents' house during a major snowstorm when they were gone, we got drunk and we ended up in the morning on the floor naked. 6 weeks later, I'm missing a period. And we go to the doctor and I'm pregnant. Well, he did the right thing on January 11th. He married me. But that was a small town, Troy, New York. What else was I going to do? Well, a week later, for his birthday, I was going to give him a birthday party on January 17th. Now, I was married on the 11th of January. A week later, I'm giving him a birthday party. And I'm at the VA hospital as a hygienist. And all of a sudden, I start bleeding. And I'm bleeding. And I'm cramping. So I called my father and he picked me up and brought me to the doctor. Doctor said, "You got to get in bed. You're having a hard time." But there's only 2 months pregnant, maybe. And I said, "I can't go. I can't. I'm giving my husband a birthday party tonight." Well, we did the party and he found me in the bathroom in the middle of the night, just hemorrhaging, and took me to the hospital. And they did a D&C, and I was back at work at the VA on Monday. I had the D&C on a Saturday, and I was back at the hospital. I was 22 years old, and that was the story. But no, we never wanted any. So he said to me for my 30th birthday, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want my tubes tied." And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yes, we're not going to have any kids. I don't want to use all these condoms and all the diaphragms and all this lubrication. It's vile. We're not having any kids." We couldn't. And the doctor, who was my gynecologist, knew our life and knew it wouldn't work. So I got a psychological evaluation, and the psychological basically said that if I got pregnant, I'm having abortion. I'm not going to get pregnant. I don't want kids. We don't want kids. Our lifestyle's not conducive for children. We never wanted any. So I just had my tubes tied, and Jeffrey threw me a party. he threw me a party whenever we did anything that was crazy. So I had my tubes tied, and I was still back at work 2 days later. But in general, that was our life. It was just crazy. You have to be in a moment. Everybody has this moment in life. Everybody has this life that's powerful. You all have great stories, but you must get them out. Mine is no different. Mine was my life. This is my life, my story. It's not yours. It's not for you to understand. I don't have to understand your life. It's not that. Tell your story. Write it out. Speak it out. Talk it out. That's all. But get it out. You matter. Your story matters. Mine is done. I'm just continuing on the journey doing more. But my story's in a book. but it's my life. It's not yours. So for anybody to say, how'd she do it? Well, how did you have 5 kids and still maintain a husband and a marriage and a life? I'd have been blowing my brains out way ahead of time. You got 5 kids and you're functioning properly. Well, good for you. I mean, it's your life. It's simple.
What did your parents think about uh, your relationship and the pregnancy at that time?
They were just, honestly, God, they were just so happy, Rich Harder, that it was Jeffrey who knocked me up and not somebody else. Like that movie Knocked Up. As I can relate, I watch that movie constantly with who is it, Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl, where she gets knocked up by this guy who's anything but the right guy she should be with. And I'm thinking to myself, of all the guys I brought home and took to my sister's house in Boston and all the places I traveled to, Puerto Rico and Jamaica by myself when I was a hygienist at the VA hospital in New York. I mean, all the people that I did with, and when they knew I was even pregnant, it was horrible. But when they knew it was Jeffrey, I promise you, they were relieved. The Mintz is not so thrilled because they knew I had a reputation. And in Troy, New York, there were 60,000 people, and a good third of them were probably Jewish. And everybody knew each other. And, I had a reputation as not the nicest girl in town. Jeffrey loved me because of my personality, and I was crazy, and I was good looking and cute. And, I mean, we just had this relationship. So the Mintzes, his parents, they were not thrilled at all. But they dealt with it because I remember telling my mother-in-law after we were married, on Friday nights after Sabbath services after temple, we'd go to their house and we had pretzels and ice cream in Albany. And so next thing I know, I went in the kitchen and I was really emphatic with my mother-in-law. I said, Jeffrey is my husband, but you'll always be his mother. And I promise to always take care of him, but I'll never come between you. That's stuff that a woman should listen to. Don't try to come between a mother and her son, unless the mother's really off the wall nuts. I mean, then cut her some, cut the players some slack, all right? But basically, if you're okay, just treat the mother-in-law like she's your mother, and you get away with it. But people today are so crazy. I mean, I was talking about sanity at that point, but I really meant it. I would never have competed. His mother, I came first in many ways, but his mother was, they adored him, and I would never have done anything to change that relationship. It was too powerful. And this was in the 70s and the 80s. And it's why even into the 90s when he was ill, they adored me because of the care I took for his husband, my husband, their son. Somebody always said that I always could get more husbands, but you never get another, mother.
That is true. So you mentioned that because earlier you were talking about writing down your story, doing something, tell your story. So, what recommendations would you have for people who may say, I'm not really sure if my story is worth telling? And so, can you tell them a little bit about your journey and how that helped you in putting your book together?
Well, when Jeff was in the hospital, and I would say that everybody's story matters, and you don't have to be a writer to tell your story. You can start with just, how about getting a spiral bound notebook now? Forget the iPads and all that, unless that's really your thing. But writing is very therapeutic. There's something about having a pen in your hand. If people remember what a pen was like, or a pencil, it's called writing. Yay! The host has a pen. So, I mean, I grew up with a typewriter and pens and pencils, but you don't know later on or the next day how your story might be something that someone's going to benefit from. So just get a notepad and write down, how did you feel about tonight's show? Well, a woman had great hair, not a lot of makeup. She might wear more. And I'm thrilled about her lipstick. He's pretty good. He's got a great smile. Write down about this show. And what did you get out of it? All right. What I got out of it was I need to get tested, that my life matters, that I am worthy, that there should be no stigma attached to me. Write down what you feel now about you. That's your start tonight. And then tomorrow, elaborate on it a little bit. How was your day? How did you use what you learned tonight into tomorrow? And then take your tomorrow to the next day. Before you know it, you read it back and you go, wow, I made it through that test, though I was scared out of my mind. I got my diagnosis. All right, I'm going to get to the doctor and I'm going to handle it. Write it out. Get it. I always say, get your thoughts out of your head. Once they're out of here, they'll be clearer. You'll have more clarity and you'll be able to think properly about what it is you need to say and do. This up here is people's trouble. Your heart is open to everything, but your brain holds everything. Your heart will open up. Your brain is a confined box that's like Star Trek, the unmarked territory. Get your stuff. I'd love to swear right now, but I won't because there might be somebody that really says, I can't deal with this woman. Oh, she's way too animated. Get it out of your head. This is where you're getting all screwed up, right up in here. And writing is therapy. I believe it 100%. The therapist, if I when I taught writing, I said this. I read my book online on Facebook twice. I've read my hospice stories twice. I've taught a writing class twice, 3 times at this point on Facebook. I've always said, get your head in order and the rest of your life will follow. This is the problem. It is a cathartic, it is a cleansing, it's a purging. It's the best way to get everything out. And you don't have to be a writer. I was born to write. I've got books in drawers. I've got books like the Dead Sea Scrolls that somebody should come along and look in my drawer. They're amazing. I just can't keep self-publishing, and no one's come along all these years to do it. But will they one day maybe be published? Mm-hmm. Because I'm a writer. You do not have to be a writer. You can do anything. Get this out of your head. That's all I'm telling you tonight. If there's one thing I'm telling you, clear out your brain.
Absolutely. And while you're clearing out your brain, let's take a few minutes to basically talk about some stuff. So, let's talk a little bit about HIV. HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. HIV is transmitted sexually through blood, breast milk, vaginal secretion, anal secretion, and sharing needles, which is blood anyway. Um, and mostly from unprotected sex. So if you are going to engage in sexual activities, please make sure that you use condoms and also get tested at least once a year. But if you are having sexual partners, multiple sexual partners, um, recommendation is that you get tested a lot more frequently. It's important for you to know your status. Your partner's status is not your status. So it's important for you to go and get tested and know your HIV status. And if you are HIV negative or non reactive, there are programs that you can be a part of. Like, in addition to using condoms and getting educated, you can also take PrEP, pre exposure prophylaxis, which basically is a pill you take every day to prevent HIV. Or if you are if you test reactive or HIV positive, then you can also get into care so you can stay healthier and live a long, healthy life. All around, I think everyone have the ability to live a long, healthy life, but we need to take care of ourselves and we need to take care of each other. So get tested, know your status, talk to your partner about HIV, talk to them about their sexual activities, and find ways in which you can protect each other. And if you need some help, information is always popping up at the bottom of the screen about where you can get tested. You can give us a call at 561 208 6595. We'll be happy to help you get tested for HIV and knowing your status. And most of all, it's free. So you can absolutely get a free HIV test right here in West Palm Beach, or you can also stop by and pick up free condoms.
Oh,
Why
it's got a
wouldn't
lot of those here.
you? Absolutely, and it's
Wow,
free. Yeah, stop by and get some supplies and
pretty
protect
colors.
yourself, protect your health. Your health is your wealth.
Yeah, when I first walked into your office Saturday, it was, and I'm seeing all these colored little gold foil things and these purple things. I'm thinking he's got these little jellies, these little gummies for kids. I'm thinking there's a gold almond Hershey's, the ones that come with the almonds and the little gold foils, and then I'm realizing, no, it's not candy for the kids. Those are condoms. You got a lot of different colored condoms there.
Of course, we stay, thanks to the Florida Department of Health
Amen.
for making sure that we have the supplies we need. So this way we can cover the community with the tools to be able
Mhm.
to protect themselves. And HIV doesn't have a face. There is not a oh, HIV is a black thing or a white thing or a Hispanic thing. It's an everybody thing. And everybody need to get tested and know their status. Now, there are some communities that are greater impacted by HIV. And so we want to make sure that we continue to put emphasis on those communities so this way they can get the resources they need to get tested, know their status, and get in care, um, and understand that we have a real opportunity to lower the community viral load. So if you take your medication and you become undetectable, you will not be able to transmit the virus to somebody else. And if everyone does that, then we can eliminate a whole bunch of new infections. But also, if people wear condoms, we can also eliminate a whole bunch of new infections. And if people use PrEP, we can also do that. And also, if people talk about their HIV status, we'll be able to eliminate HIV in the near future. But as long as we continue to not talk about it, not use condoms, not get tested, not take our meds, and not seek and educate ourselves, HIV will continue to impact our communities, our families, and our loved ones.
Isn't it interesting how they got COVID vaccines so quickly? And here, 40 years later, there's no vaccine for HIV.
And they're working on some.
Well,
There's,
they're
there's
working. Not working on a COVID vaccine, are they?
they're working on it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Yeah,
also
a little harder. Work a
and
little harder.
yeah, and there's research out there too where they're working on finding a cure, or working on the cure for HIV. So, um, you know, we
Human
still,
behavior. The best cure is human behaviors.
yeah,
Because also you're thinking of pregnancies, you're thinking of other STDs.
yeah.
You know, every time you look at a woman who's pregnant, you wonder. You can say, is she also HIV positive? Did she ever? I mean, that's the issue. Human behavior will always be responsible for the actions of a community, or
Oh,
the
absolutely.
reaction, or the reactions of a community. And at this country right now, where we are, you got a lot more reaction than real good action.
When you were talking about the book and writing down on the therapeutic aspect of it, there was a comment up on the screen that says, "I came between my husband and his mother, and she loved it, and me." So, okay, Matthew.
Well, was that for Matthew? Oh, all right. You must have some comment somewhere every once in a while. But so what did he say?
He said, "I came between my husband and his mother, and she loved it and me."
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, I did. I went and told his mother, what am I going to do? I'm going to love your son, but he's always going to be my husband. But I'm going to have maybe more husbands, which was never going to happen. Is I could always have a couple husbands. And I haven't in 30 years. I'm a widow, staying a widow. I'm not on a dating site. Leave me alone. I have great works to do yet, but it's not to get married. But in general, she was there. He was adopted. So he was only going to have one mother.
Right. So, in the aftermath of Jeffrey's leaving, how did you? I know you mentioned that you had friends and family members who supported you, but what advice would you have for a caregiver who is probably supporting a husband or a wife or a spouse who's living with HIV and maybe living with AIDS and is going through the motion and they're giving their giving care to that person and what advice would you have for them about the challenges and the tasks that they have in doing that.
It's daunting. Um, you have to take each moment as it comes because if you think too far ahead, which could be a day, you'll be lost in the lab work and the doctor visits and in the emotional component. You really must learn to live very much moment to moment when you're dealing with HIV. And that's just in a relationship in general. I don't think there's any advice I could give anybody other than, again, deal with it as effectively as you can, get as much positive support as you can, tap into your faith. If you don't have any, find some. Do not turn to substances that will only make it worse. Please don't. That's the one thing. As much pot as I smoked and vodka as I drank, when he was ill, I never touched a drop of pot and I never drank. I never did any substance the 2+ years he was ill because I had to keep my head so on straight because I was lost so much of the time, but I had to make so many decisions. If you're in a relationship with your HIV partner, you're going to have to make thousands of decisions like this at times. The lab work might throw you into an absolute catatonic state or an emotional craziness. You have to live very much in the moment. Try to control as much of your environment as you can because there won't be controlling the virus. You'll maybe manage it like the meds can do. But I'm saying there's no real control over where HIV can go. There's many different places in your body. It's still there. But with Jeffrey, remember, I'm not going into today's world. I'm not here in the today's. I'm going into my world as I knew it. That there were so many different issues I had to deal with. And in a relationship, it's complicated anyway, but you can make it work. If a person is bisexual or if it's a gay couple, doesn't matter. When you love someone, you love them. To me, it doesn't matter whether it's black and white or 2 men, 2 women. I'm not caught up in any of it. I mean, that's not me at all. It never has been, never will be. But relationships are hard. Making the right decisions are hard. You're being challenged every day. Well, did I make the right choice? You made the best choice you thought you could at the moment, but cut yourself some slack. You're not perfect. It's not going to be managed perfectly. You're going to have some good days. You're going to have some bad days. Just take each day and do the best you can through it. But love. I guess there was a real good reason why I titled this book Committed to Love is because I think if there was love, true love, like I grew up in the 50s and 60s with love songs and love stories and love movies. So for me, I believe that if we had love back in our conversations, love back in our talk shows, love back in our everyday life, it doesn't mean it has to be a flesh love. We're talking about a human love, a respect love, a kindness love. There would be none of this that's going on. A lot of it we could remove because love conquers all fears and doubts. And it's an amazing thing when you allow your heart to open up and love. And I didn't realize I had that much love in me until I wrote it out in my journals and transposed it into a book and titled it Committed to Love. Because I am a person who loves. I have a bad attitude about stuff. I have a bad mouth at times. I certainly will rip you a new one if you need it. But there's that big part of me that loves and doesn't see colors or races or demographics. I really walk in a lot of love. And I've had to learn how to do that. But if we had love more on our talk shows, which are so not full of love, and if we had them on our in our media, if we had more love, we would see a lot less chaos.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great point, is that so many times people forget to go back to kind of like the basics, right? And the greatest of these is love. And so
I was thinking sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Sorry, wrong place, wrong time. All right, now the host is getting serious here. The guest.
no worries, no worries.
I just retroed. Yeah.
No, I think if we just remember that it's just about love. And I think if everyone in our community kind of like kept that same principle, then we would find it hard, it would make it harder to stigmatize people
Oh, for sure.
or who are living with HIV, experiencing HIV, who are, caring for someone. It would just be that much harder if we kind of like just everyone just put out love and just put love out into the universe.
And love is strictly just four letters put together.
Yeah,
The power it has. Four letters, LOVE. But the power of that word can take you to places you never thought you were capable of going.
absolutely.
Letters, four little letters. Wars were never started over love, that's for sure.
That's
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah. Love is really amazing, and I don't hear much of it because when people think about love, they think about sex. And that's the last thing I think about is because once you're married a bunch of years, Jeff was a psychologist and he was brilliant. He'd have been the one on the shows today talking, but he was wonderful. And when we did all these studies and surveys, and he was always testing everything on me. I mean, every survey that came out, or every test, or everything for business. I was a guinea pig. And on the list of priorities after about 10 years of marriage, sex was not up there at the highlight, was not up at the top of most lists. Love, companionship, a sense of humor, honesty, sharing interests, friendship. Sex was not up there. So, and most of you who are listening right now will be able to relate if you've been in a relationship longer than a month. All right? If you've been in a relationship that you care about longer than a week, right?
Well, we're approaching that time.
Oh,
We really appreciate you
oh my
having you on the
gosh.
show.
I gave Ricardo a list of 25 questions that I've been asked over the decades of doing this from BuzzFeed and all these other groups that have interviewed me. And Global, Thrive Global, and every interview was going to be, that was going to be the one. I'm out. I know, Rob. I know I'm out. This is the big one. This is going to launch it all. I sent him 25 questions. I don't think we touched on 3 or 4, did we?
I think we touched on a couple of them.
A couple of them out of 25,
A
right?
couple of them. Yeah, I think we touched on a couple of them. Uh,
Relationships, that's what I'm into, though. I really think that my story could help a lot of heal relationships.
yeah, for sure. Where can people find your book, Committed to Love?
In my trunk of my car.
Just
Oh,
flag her down on the street. Flag her.
just raise your hand. I'll be coming. No, they're on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And they're on my website, susanmintz.com. It's SUSANMINTZ.com. You can go to the books page. It's a very wonderful website. It's very full of information. It's got everything you need to know about me. But on the books icon page, you can see the order on whether it's Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It's an ebook for those of you who have little Kindle things and you don't want to hold something, and they're reasonable. They say the hardcover of my book sells for $26.95. It's beautiful with the pictures in the back. The soft cover is $22.95, and it still has pictures, but they're in black and white. And my hospice heart book is called "And I Held Their Hands with a Hospice Heart." And there's 24 stories also of people I met while I was volunteering at hospice and writing their stories out. So both books I wrote as a companion, my story with issues, 24 issues, and my life over these decades, and then 24 stories of hospice people I met who were so full of hope and faith, and nurses or people I met in airports. Both books really, and they also bring out my life more in the hospice book, because how I could relate. How can I relate to you if I haven't maybe been through it? So both books are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble on my website.
Absolutely. And the website is right here on the screen, susanmintz.com, SUSANMINTZ.com. Also, you can read some more about her story. Her bio is on there, and a couple of more information about her and Jeffrey. And you can see some other stuff. It's not just the Committed to Love and their what was the title of your hospice book?
Oh, I didn't bring it, but
What
it's
was
called
what was the
"And
title?
I Held Their Hands
And
with
I
a
held their
Hospice
hands.
Heart." 24 stories of faith, hope, I think encourage or love, something like that. But it's called "And I Held," write this down, people. "And I held their hands with a hospice heart."
Which is also located on her website. And there is a cookbook. And we're going to do a whole separate episode on this cookbook because I have a copy
Ooh, yes.
and I have been looking through this book and I'm telling you,
Mrs. Boner from Boca. I
that's-
owned Boca in 1990, and then Jeffrey got ill and stopped me on the journey. But can you imagine with today's internet where I would have been if I'd been able to continue?
it's just super, super amazing. So thank you for being here. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. I love
Thank you for
working. I
being
love
here.
being with you.
And we really appreciate you. And we are going to do another episode with just the cookbook because that is a key onto itself. And we're just gonna have to get a couple more people on here so they can kiki with you about it because
Rob
that
would
is
love it. Rob would
it
love to be
is
on with me.
it is something.
I was
Uh,
the naughty cookbook lady in Boca Raton, and the book was everywhere. And I sold about 25,000 copies all on my own. And this was between 1990 and 92. And other than Jeffrey getting ill, it would have been everywhere.
And the book is interesting. Some of the titles of the brunch foods and the plates and stuff like that are
Bundled breast of chicken.
exactly,
Yeah.
and they're really good. It's like really easy to cook stuff that you can make at home
Oh,
if
here's
you're
a
having
health cookbook.
brunch. That
It's
kind of stuff is really
healthy.
good.
I was into bodybuilding and fitness, and the recipes are healthy. And that's what's so interesting when I was selling at bookstores, and people would go, "These recipes are really good." People were buying them for the names. I mean, you put 114 names into a book, and it changes its whole dynamics. Where if you
Yeah,
just let's say blue balls, I mean, blue balls is in every cookbook out there. But when you put it with 113 other recipe names, it's not blue balls at all. It's blue balls.
yeah.
It's fun. We laughed. We had so much fun with that book.
It is going to be totally amazing, and I look forward to for us discussing that and having that. I think it's going to be a real kiki, uh,
It'll bring some people on, that's for sure.
for sure. I think. Oh my gosh, it's. I just can't wait for that one.
And I can tell how
Um,
it began too. The whole thing was just such a joke, but it tapped into me in a way that I'd never. And it was the first time I saw my name on something, and it was just such a boner. I mean, I had an M Boner license plate. I was Mrs. Boner from Boca, but it tapped into something. And people thought boner was a bad word. Boner is a glitch. It's a mistake. I mean, I grew up with boneheads and all that. So when people came, but then I become that person. And when that person becomes Mrs. Boner, it's like, a whole nother person opened up. And I can't turn her off when I become that.
Yeah, for sure. And we have another project coming up. Um,
Mm,
so if you are a person living with HIV and you would like to be on uh, a series talking about um, HIV and talking about your personal experiences, we want to hear from people who are comfortable sharing their stories, people who are comfortable talking about it. Uh,
mhm.
and people who are willing to share, because our whole goal is to help people to understand that everybody's story is not the same, and that people go through different challenges when they're living with HIV, and also the caregivers also face different challenges when they're taking care of their loved ones who are living with HIV. And so um, we'll be providing more information as the weeks go by, and we look forward to hearing from you. But if you have any questions, I will actually put the phone number up here again for you. Um,
And that's what we wanted to know was that if you would like to tell your story and be willing to tell your story, we
yep.
want to hear it because stories are what people want to know. Because one story can affect 1,000 people.
Absolutely. And the phone number to reach us is 561 208 6595. 561 208 6595. It's right here on the screen. And if you have additional questions or comments or feedback, please continue to leave it in the messages. Um, and also, yes, Miss Anita, you will see it soon.
How is
uh,
that? Hi.
uh,
Yeah, and if anybody wants to email me, they can. All my information's on my website, but it's smintz7179 at AOL.com. So you can always email me, and you can also text me or all of that stuff. I mean, I'm out. It's fine.
All right. So again, prioritize your health, get tested, know your HIV status. Give us a call at 561 208 6595. We look forward to hearing from you, talking with you, and continue to support our programming. We really appreciate you. And if you would like to be one of those future episodes talking about your HIV status and sharing your story to help others, absolutely feel free to give us a call at this very same number. And you can ask for me, Richardo Jackson, and we'll go ahead and provide you with additional information.
I'll
Uh,
write it out and send it to you.
Absolutely. So we look forward to having you. Please continue to like and share. Everyone who is watching right now, please like and share. Really appreciate you. Thank you for watching. And good night.
Good night. It was wonderful.